Surveying Christianity's African Roots, Session 9, Dueling Christian Congregations, Donatists versus Nicaeans, early 4th through early 5th century A.D. Here's a review of what we surveyed in the previous session. In Session 8, we covered the significant Christian activities and individuals in Northeast Africa. Africa's and Africans' contributions to Christianity before the Nicene Council. We displayed a damage report on persecution's effect upon African congregations. We talked about the Africa-specific attendees and outcomes from the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. And we talked about Ethiopia adopts Christianity as its religion of the state. Here's what we are going to cover today. Dueling congregations, Donatists versus Nicaeans. Effects from independent divergence. Rome adopts Nicene Christianity as its state religion. Catholic-Imperialist repression of Donatists. The African Roman general Gildo's coup, and more differentiating between Donatists and Nicaeans. In Session 8, we explored what the church in Africa's Northeast was experiencing. Today, let's see what the church was experiencing in Africa's Northwest with the dissenting congregations. While African Christian congregations in the Northeast were purging dysfunctions from within, Africa's Donatist congregations in the Northwest were targets of aggressions from the state of Rome, as well as from Nicene churches. The Donatists continued to struggle for survival and their identity, even after the Nicene Council of 325 AD. Let's pick up 2 decades after this first Nicene Council. You'll see that not much had changed for Africa's Christian congregations in the Northwest. Though heretics had been identified and excommunicated at the First Council of Nicaea, nothing from the council disputed the teachings of the dissenting Donatist Northwest congregations. No Donatist clergy was accused of heresy because their beliefs were the same as those of other churches present at the council. But throughout North Africa, in varying degrees, were Christian congregations separated over practices of grace versus spiritual integrity regarding the handling of members with a lapse in their faith. Donatists did not believe that their interests were represented at the Nicene Council. Though they were unified in doctrine with Nicaeans, they rejected the government-sponsored administration of Christianity. The Donatists embraced Christianity as a personal, devout way of living that was worth dying for. The steadfastness of faith exhibited by these African Christians during persecution had not been snuffed out. They were as relentless about fair representation after persecution as they were about not renouncing Christ during persecution. Yet, they still found themselves on the opposite side of justice. As a non-Nicene Christian dissident movement, Donatist congregations increased in number in Italy and Spain as well. they continued to refine their identity and distinction from Nicene congregations. In 346 AD, 33 years after the Edict of Milan, the Bishop of Carthage died. And according to a 30-year-old protocol, a leader of the Donatist congregation was supposed to be recognized as the next bishop. However, he was not. The Donatists appealed to Emperor Constance, who was Constantine's son, for recognition as sole bishop of Carthage. And in response, Emperor Constance sent military officials with troops to investigate and make peace. But instead, his religious advisor seized the occasion to enforce an edict of unity, but under Nicene leadership. Now, to the Donatists, it was like persecution all over again. But this time, it was not for their faith, but seemingly for their politics and ethnicity. And violence erupted again. Enforcement of this edict led to civil authorities offering financial incentives for Donatist leaders to convert to Nicene. But when persuasion and bribery failed, the government resorted to force. From 346 to 348 AD, a renewal of strife between the Donatists and Nicaeans created new martyrs and new martyrdom stories. Both groups used the Bible as the authoritative source for their position. It remains unclear how Donatist Bible teachings differed from that of the Nicaeans. Yet they were fundamental differences in their application of Scripture. Over the next quarter century, the Donatist and Nicene congregations operated separately without social interaction. They developed different social orders, behaviors, and different spin-off subgroups. Such a long-term divergence had negative consequences. So it seems that the negative consequences to the Donatists as a result of this divergence led to an emergence of a subgroup called the Circumcillians. Circumcillians were a bizarre Northwest African phenomenon that emerged during the middle of the 4th century in Numidia, the seat of the Donatists. Bands of Berber extremists who also regarded martyrdom as a virtue traveled around and intentionally put their life at risk by provoking others to kill them. Perhaps initially this was done to give visibility to social inequalities. They condemned poverty and slavery and advocated free love, canceling debt, and freeing slaves. But there was also a negative consequence upon the Nicene as a result of this divergence. In the mid-370s AD, there was a resurgence of concern about heresy and heretics among Nicene churches north of the Mediterranean and in the East. The concern was not so much to defend or cleanse Christian ideology internally as much as it was to identify the various external adversaries to Nicene Christianity. A product of this resurgence of concern were extensive hit lists of heretics. Now, both of these developments will later be used against the dissenting congregations of Africa's Northwest. Now, regarding this hunt for heresy and heretics, though not deemed to be heretical, the Nicene church-state power complex placed the Donatists on the heretic list. The reason was unclear, but it seemed to be due to their association with the Circumcilians and perhaps their common Numidian origins and reverence for martyrs. Oddly, Donatists did not believe that they were polluted by association with the Circumcilians. Donatists believed the Christian world in general was to blame for the crimes of these unknown Africans, and that the heretic list was a tool supporting the specific power aims of the Nicene Church and its involvement with the Roman state. To officially label them by association with the Circumcilians as dangerous heretics was a power move to undermine their acceptance and influence. 10 years later, the motive for lumping these dissenting African congregations in with these roving bands of African Numidians called the Circumcilians, and then putting them all on a heresy list became painfully clear. Rome adopts Nicene Christianity as its state religion, carefully boxing out Africa's Northwest Christian congregations. Rome adopts Nicene Christianity as state religion in 380 AD. It's referred to as the Edict of Thessalonica. It was issued by the three reigning Roman emperors, Theodosius I, Gratian, and Valentinian II. They all declared Nicene Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. But this was declared without consulting the head of the Christian church in Rome or anywhere. And from this point forward, they reserved the term Catholic, used as a noun rather than an adjective, a distinct religious entity within Christendom, as we might call a denomination. The edict required subjects to confess their Nicene Christian faith to the bishops of Rome and in Alexandria in Egypt. So you can see how this would box out African dissenting congregations in Africa's northwest. Alexandria was in Africa's northeast. The dysfunction amongst the Nicene congregations under Rome was that this declaration to adopt Nicene Christianity as Rome's state religion was unfortunately made by secular emperors or pagan emperors who did not consult the church. Now, to the Donatists, this reeked with the stench of politics and manipulation. For the Donatists, their apprehensions were confirmed. Here's some of the apprehensions that were confirmed. The elements of the Donatists' apprehension about the agenda of this Rome church-state union was painfully falling into place. Here's what was falling into place. The reason why Nicene Christians became so pro-Rome. The traitor Sicilians' selection to represent them in all of Northwest Africa at the Nicene Council. The exclusion of Donatists from Emperor Constantine's list of officially recognized Christian congregations in order to be eligible for rebuilding funds and protection. The renewed interest in heretics and heresy by the churches north of the Mediterranean, the inclusion of Donatists and Circumcilians on the list of heretics, and Rome's lack of protection for Donatist congregations. The unrelenting and steadfast Donatists had objected to such a church-state union, but few will listen to them. But what could they do? A little over a decade later, in 393 AD, Catholics sent representatives to imperial courts to advocate new legislation and renewed old laws against the Donatists. Donatists were subject to fines and threatened with deportation for disrupting the Catholic Nicene Church. They were forbidden to ordain new bishops, then forbidden to assemble, ordain clergy, or teach. They were forbidden to gather for any rituals. Catholics kept pressure on the imperial courts for more anti-Donatist legislation, as well as financial and civic penalties. Nicene Catholics had stepped up their suppression of Donatists by using the legal system, much like Jim Crow laws had been used against African Americans. But one Berber from Numidia, who was in the Roman army, plotted to liberate Northwest African territories from Roman rule. Let's see about him. General Gildo's coup returns territories back to Africa. Roman Emperor Theodosius I's insistence that Catholics and Donatists find a way to live together was reflected in Roman-controlled African territories being largely under officials who were not inclined to oppress the Donatists. The Roman general Gildo, also a magistrate of Africa, was the son of Moorish Berber king Nubal. He provided oversight of Rome's Northwest African territories. After Theodosius' death, enemies entered the Roman Empire's east from the north. Given Rome's preoccupation with this enemy, in 395 AD, General Gildo seized the opportunity to take control of Africa's northwest for himself. He recaptured the African territories that were under Rome, declared their independence, and then sought to restore its former glory. Then the emperors of Rome declared that anyone receiving help from Gildo was deemed a heretic and a revolutionary against Rome, and the properties of Gildo's supporters and that of Donatist bishops were confiscated. Now, Gildo had a good run for about 6 years. Yep, it took that long for Rome's military to recapture the African territories that he had returned to the African people. But from that point forward, there was a severe imbalance in political and religious power between North Africa and the state of Rome. In 401 AD, Gildo was overthrown by Rome. His failure to maintain African control over Africa's territories led to a severe imbalance of political and religious power there in North Africa and the state of Rome. From that point forward, only Christians who were loyal to the Roman emperors and to Catholic Nicene Christianity were appointed to positions of power in North Africa. Never again were African military leaders allowed to hold command in North Africa. Never again would a North African or Donatist sympathizer be sent as a Roman representative to Africa. Catholic fears accelerated repressive legislation against the Donatists. So this is 1,200 years before Martin Luther's Reformation. And the Donatists had realized something was inappropriate about Rome's church-state union. Finally, I want to give you some other differences between the Donatists and the Catholics that are interesting to know. Attempts to reconcile the differences between Donatists and Catholics by a number of popes and respected figures such as Augustine of Hippo all failed. Most of the time, Donatists outnumbered Catholics, but Catholics had the weight of Roman imperialism on their side. And for the sake of perspective, the following are a few differences between the two expressions of Christian faith. Donatist worship had a reputation of having charismatic, energetic, and unstructured services. Donatist confessions were public. The repenting member confessed sins before the entire congregation, not privately with the priest. Source of their differences was not theological, but perhaps for survival. Donatism had began to take the shape of nationalism, particularly in Numidia, Africa. Donatists contrast their intimacy-based form of Christianity against the Catholics of Africa, claiming those Catholics embraced an imported brand of Christianity from north of the Mediterranean. Catholics of Rome were sometimes put off by the fierceness of Donatist Christians. Well, that's it for session 9. Next, in session 10, we will cover Africa's hardening of Christian philosophy. Early church fathers, Aurelius of Carthage and Augustine of Hippo. Contributions of Augustine of Hippo. Growing desert faith communities. Africa's hardening of Christian ecclesiology. Authority and primacy of the African Code of Canons. We will still be in the early 4th through early 5th century AD, and that will cover chapters 14 and 15. Don't forget to get the research book. For the next 2 weeks, we will explore the locations, faith, and contributions of African Christians from the 1st through the 6th century AD, Surveying Christianity's African Roots by Jimmy D. Compton Jr. You can get the spiral bound book at lulu.com. You can get the regularly bound book at amazon.com. Thank you, and God bless you.